Hello, and welcome to this Wednesday's edition of A Walk in My Shoes. I'm Kayla Powell, your host, and I'm here today with Jacob Neff, an Assistant General Manager at Fireproof Restaurant in the Short North. Welcome, Jacob.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So if you want to start off by telling us a little bit about Fireproof, what makes Fireproof a little bit different? You are situated in the Short North, so I'm assuming a little bit smaller of a business, not a chain.
Correct. So we are owned and operated by a local management company named Peerless Management, and we are the one and only Fireproof restaurant. But we are a globally inspired tapas-style restaurant that really focuses on a sort of unique concept to the Columbus area. We focus on vibe-driven dining. So everything on our menu is small plate, shareable options, kind of encourage more of a social ability aspect to the restaurant. And we incorporate a very high energy atmosphere that is kind of unique to a lot of the dining that you would find in the Short North.
Well, it sounds good already, and it's about lunchtime, so I'm hungry. But that's awesome. I have not yet visited Fireproof, but it's definitely on my list to take a look at. So if you want to give a little bit about your background, what education do you have to have? And what was your education route? Where did you go to high school? Are you here local from Columbus?
Yes, so I was born and raised in Columbus in a suburb called Galloway. Went to Westland High School. After graduating there, I went to college at Kent State University, where I graduated in hospitality management with a Bachelors of Science, and kind of took off from there. Came back to Columbus, and I guess you could say I got my first career kickoff job at the Columbus Marriott Northwest as part of their manager and training program, which I think you're familiar with as well.
I'm very familiar. It sounds like a great program. So as a manager in training, what were some of your duties? What did you learn? And what department of the hotel were you situated in?
So I was part of the food and beverage department. And, as part of the manager and training program, they taught you, how to manage the day-to-day activities, the operations of the bar, the restaurant, the room service, and the elite member concierge lounge there, how to kind of go about menu development and planning, as well as, some of the administrative tasks like payroll and scheduling and all the fun, tedious things that come along with management. And kind of they go into, how to manage a team and lead them and improve guest satisfaction. That was a really big thing there at the Marriott as well.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about what you learned in your manager in training role at the Marriott, were those some of the things that they also touched on in your courses at Kent State? Or did you learn something a little bit different while in college? Did you learn even more once you were in a hands-on role?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there. What was the question again?
Okay. My question was, when you were in the manager in training role, did you learn about the same things that you did at Kent State while you were in school? Or was there even more learning once you got into the hands-on aspect?
So I think Kent State did a really good job at kind of preparing me and knowing what to expect going in. And I think that kind of helped me propel my role as the in part of the manager and training program. But there's always a huge difference between learning and actually doing. So being part of the manager and training program, I did learn a lot. Learning how to and lead a team is something that you can't really learn very well on paper. It's something that you kind of just have to be in there in the moment and do.
Get right to it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. And learn from your mistakes, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, there are plenty of mistakes, opportunities. So that's part of the journey.
Yeah. So what made you leave the manager in training role? Did you feel that you were ready to take on an actual management role? And how did you go about finding Fireproof?
Yeah, so after I was promoted to the food and beverage supervisor there at Marriott, and I did that for roughly about a year and a half. And yeah, I think I was to that point where, I was wanting more. I was wanting more development. I was wanting to push myself to a level that, I needed more responsibility. So I just happened to come across Fireproof's opening and jumped on the opportunity. And after meeting the owners and some of the key players involved in that company, we just kind of jumped right in, and I started the process of opening my first restaurant.
That's awesome. So you were part of the opening team for the restaurant?
I was, yep. I was involved in pretty much every aspect except the actual construction.
Wow. That's pretty impressive to put on your resume and to be a part of at such a young age as a young professional.
Yeah, it was an extremely exciting time, and it was an opportunity that I definitely couldn't pass up. And it was, I've learned so much, being a part of that team and opening my first restaurant. It really opened your eyes to exactly what goes into running an establishment like that.
Yeah. I'm sure there were some bumps and bruises and mistakes made along the way, but how do you overcome that as a team?
So I mean, communication is such a crucial part of any restaurant business. Having a good communication with your team and with your staff is crucial. When you make a mistake, making sure that you're communicating with everybody, that we're thinking of how to fix it and just moving forward from there. You can't, once a mistake's made, you deal with it and you move on. And that's just kind of how the business goes. You can't dwell on those kind of things.
Yes. Yeah. So being in the restaurant business myself for a short period of time and also having a hospitality management degree, I can totally relate. Once that mistake's made, you just have to brush it off and just make the situation the best that you can from that point on.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, it's in the restaurant business, it's all about the guest. So as long as the guest is happy, then at the end of the day, it's been a successful day.
Now, is that difficult for you sometimes? Because they say the guest is always right, but I'm sure that we could think of a couple times where in the back of our mind, we know they're not really right. But how difficult is that sometimes when you have to bite your tongue and go above and beyond someone that might be treating you in a terrible way?
There are difficult times like that sometimes. And it's really all just about having that service mentality. That's what it really comes down to. That want to make sure that everybody enjoys themselves. That's what you have to focus on. You can't focus on what's actually happening, who's right or wrong, because then nothing gets done. Um,
That's a great way to look at it, Jacob.
right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. And at the end of the day, if that guest leaves happy, no matter what the situation, they're going to end up coming back and spending more money. So in the end of the day, we win.
Right. So to circle back to you being on the opening team, were you hired as the assistant general manager? Were you promoted in a very short time frame? What did that look like?
So I was originally hired on as the front of house manager, um, so that's what I was when I was opening. Once we opened, about a month after we opened, is when I was promoted to the assistant general manager. So it was a relatively quick process. It was a very challenging process. It was a kind of a do or die process. Um, but I kept pushing and learning and growing, and it paid off.
That's awesome. To be promoted in such a short period of time and see your hard work paying off, that someone's recognizing the hard work that you're putting into this and that you deserve to grow with a company that's also growing.
Right. Yeah. It's been an extremely rewarding process, and it's something that I've taken great pride in and have really enjoyed the whole journey as a whole.
That's great. You've talked so highly so far about Fireproof in the restaurant industry, but unfortunately, COVID back in March, things really took a turn for the worse. In March, how long were you guys open as a fairly new business? And then how have things changed for you due to COVID closing and then social distancing and having to now close at 10 p.m.? How has that affected your business?
It has been quite a difficult journey. We had only been open for, I think, about half a year before the COVID thing hit. So it was a really big hit to us. Um, but, we as a management team, we sat down and we decided that we weren't just going to lay over and let fate take its course, that we were going to do something about it. So we decided that we were going to push hard every day, push hard with marketing and promoting, and do everything in our power to try to get every single person that we can in through the building. And it's not like how it was before. Obviously everyone, including ourselves, are still hurting from the effects of the shutdown and the curfew and everything like that. However, I think it would be safe to say that we have been one of the more fortunate restaurants in the area, and have been able to make enough success to stay afloat.
That's great to hear that you guys are still being super successful even through the hardest of times, the hardest that the restaurants have seen in quite a while. So I'm really happy for you guys. How do you get the word out there that yes, we're open and here are some promotions we're running? How do you go about that? Do you advertise on social media? Do you have commercials? What platforms are you guys using?
Yeah, so I mean, there's really no better advertising than word of mouth. But we push social media really hard. We have a Facebook and an Instagram account. We do promotions with many local advertising agencies such as 614 Magazine, Columbus Underground. We've done a couple ads or highlights in a couple local news stations. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is getting out there and just spreading the word. A lot of word of mouth advertising is kind of, what it really takes to get people in through the door.
I agreed. Me having a friend come to me saying that they enjoyed Fireproof means so much more than me seeing an ad in the paper. That goes a long way. And then I will join my friend, and you have an even bigger party for that table next time. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's great. Okay, so about COVID a little bit more. So has your capacity decreased substantially? How are you maintaining social distance for not only the guests but employees to keep your employees safe?
Right. So, excellent question. We did take all of the guidelines and social distancing rules very seriously at Fireproof. Everything in our restaurant is 6 feet apart. We follow all the protocols. We were blessed, actually, that we didn't lose a whole lot of space due to the layout of our restaurant. For the most part, it already met the 6-foot standards.
Wow.
Obviously, there was some rearranging that had to be done,
Yeah.
but it wasn't quite as detrimental as I thought it would be. But everything is spaced. We do have barriers between anything that does need a barrier. We do require face masks. We supply face masks for anybody that doesn't have one. We do take our employees' temperatures before they start work as an effort to help keep them safe. And we with our staff, we're very big on making sure that sanitation standards are met, that everybody is staying clean and keeping up with hygiene. I think that's in large part some of the most important parts of making sure that everybody has a safe and fun experience.
Yeah. So standards for restaurants and hotels and the hospitality industry in general were already pretty high. But now that coronavirus is a thing, I'm sure your standards have been even held to a higher standard.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Obviously, even before coronavirus, we always sanitized everything, but now everything's like doubly sanitized. You have your regular sanitizer and your COVID sanitizer. So we use both on all of our tables and all of our surfaces. Hand washing in general has become a much more prominent thing. It's hard to believe because, it's such an important thing in the restaurant industry already.
Yeah.
Like I said, checking temperatures as well is a new thing that we started there. And overall, really hammering down on safe food practices and safe handling, and making sure that everybody gets the proper attention if they are feeling sick is kind of key.
So you talked a little bit about food handling. Is that something as an assistant general manager that you help with? Do you delegate those tasks? Because I know when a shipment comes in, it needs to be taken care of pretty quickly, I assume.
Yeah, so as soon as a shipment of food comes in, it goes directly where it needs to go. Myself and my head chef are pretty much the ones that take care of that. Everything's checked when it arrives for quality to make sure that there are no imperfections in the packaging or the shipment itself that might compromise the shipment. And we're obviously, because of COVID, we're extra particular about that. Everything has to be perfect. We already prided ourselves on perfection before COVID, but now there's no room for error.
Right.
So making sure that we have the highest quality products is how we maintain that, not only guest loyalty but the consumer confidence.
Great. So you mentioned a head chef. What does your management team look like at your location? I'm assuming that there might be a general manager above you, and who else is on your management team?
Yes. So, due to COVID, we our management team has been affected as well. It's not quite as significant as it prior. Um, so there's myself. There is a general manager, and we also have a director of operations that hops around from one establishment to the next, but is very prevalent at Fireproof. And then we have our head chef and a head sous chef, and that makes up the majority of our management team. Myself and the general manager do most of the front of house and guest interactment, while the chef and the sous chef handle most of the food quality and processing of those items.
So talk a little bit for us, please, about front of house and back of house. For people that aren't as familiar with what those terms mean, if you could explain them, and how they are pretty different.
Oh yes. So yeah, they're like two different worlds. The front of house, referring to basically everything that the guest sees, includes pretty much everything except the kitchen, actually. But front of house is included in the bar, the seating of the guests, and all of the servers and the staff that interact with the guests. That myself and the general manager focus on. We focus on guest engagement, on maintaining COVID sanitations in the actual floor of the restaurant, where guests are interacting with staff. And then the back of the house refers to mainly the kitchen, or areas of the restaurant that the guests might not see. And that's where, all of your food preparation is taken, or is handled, all of your food storage, and where all the magic happens, I guess you could say, behind the scenes that the guest won't see. So that's kind of that's what our chef is largely in charge of and handles. And then obviously having great communication between the two is the key to making sure that you have a successfully running restaurant.
I'm sure, yeah. If there's not communication between you and the chef, and you're out of something, or there's a hold on an item because we don't have it ready in time, if that communication's not there, it could be complete chaos and an unhappy customer.
Right, exactly. Yep. The communication is what helps save the day.
Yeah. All right. Have you ever worked in the back of house? It sounds like a lot of your recent experience has been front of house. Have you had experience in the back of house? And what was that, if so?
So I've never actually worked as my full-time position in a back of house establishment. However, being the assistant general manager, you are expected to learn a lot of the techniques and the ingredients that go into our food. So I have had experience per se, and learned the ways of the kitchen. But I wouldn't say that I've ever actually worked there as my full-time position.
Gotcha. So as an assistant general manager, you have to know what everyone in every position is doing. You have to know, is my sous chef doing what he's supposed to? Slacking off a little bit? Is he meeting the quota that we need to reach? And you need to know, is this waiter an asset to our team now? Or is he slacking? Is he serving to the company standards? You have to know what everyone's doing.
Correct. Yep. And myself and my chef, we have to keep each other in a system of checks and balances. Make sure that nobody is slacking off and that everybody's meeting our standards. So yeah, it's very important to know every aspect of the restaurant.
About how many people do you employ at Fireproof, front and back of house?
So pre-COVID, We were running a staff of around 65 people. Now that in today's world, we're down to probably somewhere in the, I mean, it fluctuates, but somewhere around 30 to 45 people is about what our staff runs at.
Wow. So quite a significant cut, about in half.
Almost.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that for all the folks that unfortunately had to be laid off or furloughed for the time being because of this situation. So is it easier to manage a smaller team, being that you have to know what everyone in the establishment is doing and keeping up and making sure that everyone's doing their job so you are working forward as a team? Is it easier to manage a smaller staff? Are you missing some of those folks, wishing you had some more employees at times?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's easier. Obviously, there are less people to keep track of. However, running with less staff has plenty of challenges. Obviously, you don't have as many people as you did prior, so everyone has more responsibility all around, including myself. So, maintaining staff morale is a huge part of it, because especially with more stress and more responsibility, it's very easy to get down on yourself and not provide that level of service that you really want to provide. So it's created a much more of a leadership mentality, I guess you could say, for everyone there, to kind of pick up the slack and kind of push through this.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're learning some skills that they might not have known they were going to walk into. So expanding their resume, expanding your resume. You mentioned that you had to also pick up some responsibilities, now that the team has been basically cut in half. Are there things on your to-do list that you never really saw yourself doing, but as a manager, you have to pick up where the help is needed?
Yeah, so there are things that I have to do now that I was not expecting to do. However, going into the position, it's always important to know that there might come a time that you might have to do something that's not required or that's not typically a part of your position. So for instance, there are days that I have to jump in and take tables and serve, which is, something that going into the position, I really didn't think I was going to have to do. So, yeah, I have to pick up and kind of jump in with them sometimes, and that if that's what it takes, to make sure that everybody has a happy time and gets the job done.
And you mentioned morale of your employees, and I'm sure that seeing you as a manager of the establishment, jumping in and serving tables helps morale. It helps the waiters and waitresses. Wow, here's my boss. He's waiting tables too. He's not too good to do the job that I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that is a big part of it, and that does help keep morale up, and it helps encourage them, and gives them a I can do it kind of mentality.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you've learned a lot along the way, and you're very grateful for the experience and expanding your knowledge of the restaurant industry. But is there one thing that you wish you knew going into this role, something that you didn't learn in school or in the manager and training program, that could have really helped you out, that you had to learn the hard way?
Yeah, actually. So, like I said earlier, there isn't a whole lot that prepares you how to manage people, and that is one thing that I wish I would have learned a little bit more of going into it, and maybe not figure out so much on the job and figure out as how I go. So, learning how to manage a team and not only your guests uh, is something I probably would have preferred to have learned more before starting my career out.
Yeah. And that is tough because every situation is different. No two guests are going to have the same complaint. It's going to be slightly different. The experience is always different. Whether I go to Fireproof tomorrow and then again the next day, I'm going to have two totally different experiences. So that is really hard to manage people because everyone's different. The staff that you may have overseen at Marriott, they're completely different than the ones you have at Fireproof.
Yes, they are. Yeah, it's always a unique situation, and every day is a new day, and new things happen. So, it's an environment where you have to constantly be on your toes and just be willing to take on whatever the day has to throw at you.
Yeah. So going back to the management company and how they have recently opened Fireproof, within the last year, year and a half, do they plan to open any more restaurants or hospitality venues here in the near future, even with COVID being a factor?
Yes, actually. So in March, hopefully in March, we do plan on opening a new venue called Gala Park, which will be an upstate or upscale steakhouse concept that turns into an upscale nightclub at night. Obviously, that is all pending on how the pandemic plays out. But we are actively pursuing that opening. Prior to COVID, we were planning on opening up two other Fireproof locations. We are still wanting to pursue that. Obviously, that will be due to how the pandemic plays out. But once things start to settle down a little bit, we are going to actively start entertaining those ideas again.
That's awesome. Such a rapidly growing company, it seems like. Do you see room for growth for you? Would you be interested in being a general manager, maybe even getting into the operations at the corporate level?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I would love to be the general manager, and I actually aspire to get into the more operations and the business development aspects of the company. So that is definitely something that I can see myself aspiring to.
So if you were to pursue either of those roles, is there any continued education that you would need? And even if you don't jump into one of those roles in the near future, is there education that you have to keep up on as an assistant general manager? Any training, certifications?
So, I mean, if as far as schooling is concerned, a master's degree would definitely help. However, it's not required. Um, it's a lot of hands-on learning. I think is really the only real way that you get to that level. Um, and this industry specifically is an industry where you have to be constantly learning and have to be constantly teaching yourself and keeping up with trends and the next new thing, because it is a very fast changing business. Like I said previously, every day is a new day. So, keeping up with new trends is important, and only way to really learn and grow in the business.
So you mentioned that a master's degree would be helpful, but not absolutely necessary for your role. Is a bachelor's degree absolutely necessary for anybody aspiring to be an assistant general manager? Or is it possible that they could work their way up from server to supervisor without any type of college degree?
It is possible to get to an assistant general manager position without a college degree. However, it is a much longer road. Um, Whereas getting your college degree kind of helps you skip a step. Um, and many locations won't hire an assistant general manager without a college degree. So it would be something that you kind of have to work up through an establishment in order to get to, um, without a college degree.
Okay. We do have a question here from the audience, and the question
Sure.
reads, do you need kitchen experience in order to manage a restaurant? Meaning cooking, prepping, expediting.
So cooking experience is strongly preferred, and I would highly recommend it to anybody that's trying to pursue that field. However, I mean, myself as an example, I've never worked in a kitchen as a full-time job or career. So I wouldn't say that it's 100% necessary. However, it is 100% necessary to learn the aspects of the kitchen.
Okay. And what different aspects are you talking about? The different dishes, meals that you guys, that you're serving, portion size, techniques in the kitchen, all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, any restaurant that you're going to manage at, you're going to want to know the food, the ingredients in all of your dishes. You're going to need to know how to describe those dishes, how to help guests with ordering and any dietary needs that they have. So knowing your options and your ingredients in all of that those dishes is extremely important. Um, but knowing how a kitchen operates in general is important. Knowing how food is prepared, what goes where, cross contamination, do's and don'ts, storage techniques, just the overall operations of the kitchen, I think is one of the most important parts. You don't necessarily need to be, you know, Chef Gordon Ramsay with all the fancy knife flare techniques in order to manage a restaurant. But knowing how a kitchen works is important.
It can be a lot to learn, I'm sure. You mentioned dietary restrictions. So, if I were to walk into Fireproof and mention a dietary restriction, how is my order separated from other orders that might have, say, I'm allergic to nuts? How is my order separated from other orders that might contain nuts?
So, you know, again, it goes back into making sure that, you know, we're following all proper standards in the kitchen, and that we're not cross-contaminating ingredients. So storage and preparation techniques are a crucial part of how a kitchen operates. Um, but we train our servers to be able to talk about our food. And if there are dietary needs, you know, they are trained to let the kitchen know and what cannot go in those items. And the kitchen then doesn't place it with those other items. So if all standards are followed properly, there's really no issue with worrying about, you know, nuts being in your dish or not.
Okay. We have another question here from the audience. Is customer service experience necessary to get into restaurant management?
That it would be, yes. Customer service experience is one of the most crucial parts of running a restaurant. You have to be able to deal with people and want to deal with people, and having experience in the customer service industry is crucial to learning how to handle those kind of situations. So that is definitely something that you definitely need to learn, whether it's in retail, um, as a server, bartender, some sort of in hotels, some sort of customer service experience would definitely be necessary.
And it's a pretty fast-paced environment you're working in, correct?
Yes, it's a very fast-paced environment. So it's definitely something that you always have to be on your toes. You always have to be thinking ahead. Um, and like I said, dealing with people, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So did you always know that you wanted to go into the food and beverage restaurant industry, or did you have something else on your radar when you were going to school for hospitality management?
Um, yeah, actually, so when I was going to school, I had absolutely no ending up in I had always wanted to get into the hotels and resorts industry, which I did. However, through my years working in the industry, um, I was always being pulled into the food area. Eventually, instead of continually fighting it, I learned to embrace it and just kind of go with it. And it's paid off.
That's awesome. Um, so dealing with guests each and every day, it could be exhausting. Just having complaints and the extra safety measures from COVID and everything pulling you each direction, it can be exhausting, I'm sure. Has there ever been a time or a day that you go home from work and you're like, wow, this just isn't for me anymore, and you're on the brink of giving up?
I think I'd be lying if I said there weren't those days. um, everybody has their ups and downs. Um, but at the end of the day, it's those days that you're able to really make those guests happy and make it the best time of their life that makes it worth it. Just that satisfaction that you get from making people's day is kind of what keeps me going and keeps that passion alive.
And what are you most passionate about in your current role in the hospitality industry in general?
Um, I would say that, development of our products is one thing that I'm extremely passionate about. Um, Creating full cocktails and dishes that people really love and enjoy is a really unique and exciting thing to be a part of. And then, I'm also a very competitive person, so competing in one of the most competitive areas of Columbus is always an exciting time and really pushes you to be your best.
So you mentioned a couple things there I wanted to touch on. Creating cocktails. That sounds really exciting and really cool. Brings some creativity to the table. So do you get to craft cocktails as well as the dinner menu at Fireproof?
Yes, so the cocktail creation is actually one of my main domains, whereas I help assist with the chef in creating dishes. Uh, the cocktails are kind of my area, uh, more of the front of the house aspect. So yeah, I am fully involved in the menu development as far as the beverage program is concerned.
Are you involved in the food side, or is that mostly chef and the sous chef?
So the chef and the sous chef, they do most of the menu development as far as the food goes, and then they run it by myself and the general manager, and we kind of tweak it and help perfect it.
When you say tweak it, I know it can be hard to shoot down ideas of a colleague, but has there been something where you're like, I'm not sure that idea is gonna be a good one for Fireproof? Are you honest with your team and letting them know when you don't think it's a great idea?
Oh yes, yeah, you have to be. I know, nobody wants to hurt each other's feelings, but at the end of the day, we're all here to better each other. And if we don't think that something is going to be as successful as it could be, it's important that we share our opinions and help improve those items and develop a menu that our guests will really enjoy and that'll be unique to the Columbus area. And in the end, that's how you really.
So if I were to go to Fireproof tonight, what would you suggest I order?
Everything. I'm just kidding. So our gambas al hilo is one of our signature dishes, so I would definitely recommend that. It's butter poached shrimp in a calabrese chili butter oil. That comes with some crostini dipping bread on the side. Phenomenal dish, very savory if you like shrimp. Our wagyu, well, really any of our wagyu items are fantastic. But our wagyu dumplings are probably one of my personal favorites, which are house rolled every single day. Yeah, they're delicious. And we use, again, wagyu beef. For those that don't know, it's a very prized form of beef that originates from Japan. That creates a very fantastic marbling in the beef that has some of the best flavor out of most steaks that you'll ever find.
And if I were to order a cocktail tonight with dinner, which would you suggest?
Well, so that would depend on your preference in drinks, really. However, one of our most popular items is the Spanish Old Fashioned. If you prefer dark liquor, it is a bullet bourbon or your choice of bullet bourbon or rye. We add some liquor 43 in there for sweetness, which is a Spanish liqueur with 43 different herbs and spices. We then add in mole bitters and then smoke it with cherry wood chips and pour it tableside, which creates this really unique and cool smoky waterfall effect. And it's a huge hit with all of our guests there. If you aren't a fan of dark liquor, I would recommend going with the blood orange margarita. We hand press all of our fruit juices per cocktail, so they are quite literally the freshest cocktails you can possibly get. And we set our margarita on fire, which is kind of a cool little table side effect, yeah, that people really go nuts for.
Have there been any accidents with that?
Thankfully, no. We do train our servers and staff on proper handling of potentially hazardous ingredients such as that. And they are trained on how to extinguish the items that we catch on fire. So, again, guest safety is paramount. And thankfully, we haven't had any major accidents yet.
So as a manager, I'm sure that you have to be like the head of risk management. If something were to happen as a fire, or if someone starts to choke or something very serious, how is that handled? And how do you stay calm in that situation when you know it's urgent?
Well, you have to remember that the more you freak out, the more everybody else will. So, that's kind of what keeps me calm is knowing that my life will be easier and I will be able to do more if everyone else remains calm. But, I am, all of our managers are trained on risk management. We're all like CPR and first aid certified. So we all know how to deal with those kind of situations. As far as disasters, such as if a fire were to break out, guest safety is of paramount concern. So if need be, the first thing that we would need to do is to evacuate the guests. and then deal with the issue if it came to that. So yeah.
And sometimes it's easier said than done to stay calm when you're in a stressful
Oh,
situation like that.
it definitely is. It's it's something that you're never really prepared for, um, but it's something that you have to think of, and you have to train for, um, and you always have to keep it in the back of your mind that it might happen.
Right. Yeah. And you can practice a fire drill 10 times, but when there's actually a fire, it's going to go way differently than the drill went.
It will. That's for sure.
Well, Jacob, we're getting ready to wrap up here in a walk in my shoes. Just one more quick comment from you about any tips that you would like our students to know if they're aspiring to go into the restaurant industry and aspiring to be in management. Do you have anything you'd like to say to them? Any tips, tricks, education that you'd like them to know?
If you're aspiring to go into the industry, I think one of the most important things is to make sure that you're always pushing yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And it's very easy to get complacent and stuck in this industry. So always making sure that you're pushing yourself, always doing your own research and learning and growing are keys to improving and progressing in the industry. So that would probably be my word of advice, is to always try new things and always try to be a trendsetter.
Awesome. And you yourself have been a trendsetter for the company that you're with right now, coming in as the front of house manager and stepping up into the assistant manager role. That's awesome. So thank you for everything you've talked to us about today, Jacob. We've really enjoyed having you. And that's all for today in A Walk in My Shoes. Go on and check out Fireproof on their Instagram and Facebook page, and make sure to check them out in the short north. And we will see you next week, next Wednesday, for another edition of A Walk in My Shoes. Thanks again, Jacob. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.